Yes, I'm with Philip, who's a lawyer, who's from Jersey, but he's got some interesting views on the electoral system and why people don't want to vote. Why is it? Why don't people want to vote?
Well, I think I've had the opportunity the last few days to speak to a wide array of people in Jersey, Indigenous people, and it's fascinating that their response seems to be very, very similar. Many people seem to be extremely disillusioned with the Jersey system, and most of them come out with the same answers: lack of openness, accountability, transparency, honesty and integrity. And clearly what's needed is, in my view, there needs to be a register of interests so that it will be very clear to any potential elector who can see precisely what are the vested interests, if any, and then consequently to extrapolate from that, if there are vested interests, are there any conflicts of interest? And too many times people who are local know only too well of various applications to do with planning that have gone through, and they see, such as the La Colla incinerator site, and they see that no, that shouldn't have been placed there at all. Perhaps something more tasteful in keeping with the environment, such as perhaps a marina, something of that nature. But when you have an incineration scheme immediately next to a fuel supply dump, I would have thought that many people, certainly from the feedback I've received, they think it's ludicrous. And I've also spoken to many people who are youngish, and their representations to me is the fact that there seems to be very little in the way of opportunities. So they feel compromised, and many of them feel so disillusioned they end up leaving Jersey, going to work in the UK or elsewhere, and then this is causing huge problems in Jersey. So I think many issues are almost like suppressed because the major politicians who tend to be returned time and again, and I think many people would think it's time for change. We need fresh faces, we need people with intelligence, people with ideas, people that can motivate others. Yesterday I had the opportunity to go around knocking up on people's doors in the number 1 district in St Helier, and it was very interesting, very reassuring. Every person we went to see, they were extremely welcoming, and by the very fact we interacted with them personally, not something in writing, but face to face, to hear what they had to say, and time and again, same response. Most of the Jersey people we saw, they were sick and tired of the same old bunch of clapped out politicians who support each other. And I think it's time now for change. So let's have change in Jersey.
The interest you refer, a register of interest, is not just commercial interest you have in mind. There's obviously
not just commercial interest. There are various organisations, entities in Jersey which exist, which I think many people in Jersey might not be fully aware of, but sadly, unfortunately, there is a clique, and that links to the legal system, it links to the executive, it links to the political parliamentary system. And it's time now, I feel, in 2011, for Jersey public to be made full aware. Full transparency, full accountability. Let's find out which organisations people belong to, where they might have sworn a loyalty to each other. That might have been okay in the past. That might have been okay when Jersey was in a situation where there'd been a great deal of corruption that's gone on. And I know corruption is a very strong word to use, but corruption there has been, because I have been a witness to various actions that have gone on in the past. Yes, so that's what's needed. Openness, accountability, transparency.
How does a small community, obviously if you've got a small community in the UK, there are national organisations who can help reveal things. Here, because it's such a closed island community, very difficult to find organisations like the press, for example, very limited amount of press, investigative journalism. How do you get that sort of thing in a small community like Jersey?
It is, but I think the clue and the answer to that has to be whereby there has to be a mandatory provisions whereby decisions that are taken in the public sector are made public. So it's not just matters that are held by, say, one minister, and then a decision is made in secret, and there's no opportunity for consultation, and then suddenly a decision is made without any interaction, any kind of feedback for the public. That has to be wrong. And this is where I think as well with the internet, that is an opportunity there for people to interact. But it's not good enough just for, say, the legal system to say, oh, well, you can just find it online, and then turn around and say, oh, and then you've got to pay for access to this online legal information. No, the whole point of law is there has to be transparency and it has to be free of charge.
You're a lawyer, but not a Jersey lawyer as far as I know, but there are about 250 or so Jersey lawyers. It's still a very tiny group. In any other decent sized community like the UK, you get action groups of lawyers. There's not, if 1% of English lawyers decide to form an access group, you'll get sufficient, you can maybe get a couple of hundred lawyers. 1% of Jersey lawyers, you get 2 lawyers and a bit, maybe, not enough to form an action group. Is that a real problem, do you think? Do you think that matters in Jersey?
Yes, it does. Well, more so in Jersey, by the very fact it is such a small insular community where I think many of the people, it's a closed shop. That's the problem, a closed shop. And by that very nature, there are many people who are part of the system who are very apprehensive, and they would see themselves as rocking the boat if perhaps they were to link themselves, or to be seen, because the most important thing is perception, not the reality, to link themselves with specific groups such as human rights groups representing causes which might be uncomfortable to the establishment, because I think it's very important for people to be aware of the establishment and their means of maintaining power.
For the past 3 years we've only had one Jersey lawyer in the States, that's Senator Lamarcon. This election there are several Jersey lawyers standing for election, including an ex-bailiff. What's your particular view on somebody like an ex-bailiff standing?
Well, I think I find that very scary. The reason I find that so scary is because if one is aware of the Jersey system, it's very unique. It's very much linked to feudalism, and the great analogy would be to do with the system in Sark, whereby you had a seneschal who's head of the legislature, executive, judiciary, and it's exactly the same in Jersey with the bailiff, again, head of the legislature, executive, judiciary. And effectively, he was a feudal fief. He was head of this feudal system. And fortunately, the Berkeley brothers had the opportunity to take their case, re Brecu and Sark, the suzerain, the vassal state, to the European Court of Human Rights and also the Privy Council in London. And as a result of that, that was excellent, because that had the opportunity to open up a very closed, inward-looking system. Many would identify that as a rotten, corrupt system. But effectively, it was a dictatorial system.
The Jersey lawyers, don't interrupt you, but the Jersey lawyers who are standing, none of them are saying anything very critical of the system. They're very much establishment figures as far as I can tell. And nobody is, of course, stepping out of line and criticising the finance industry. And that, the total involvement of the Jersey lawyers with finance, that cannot be healthy, can it?
Of course, no, it can't be. And again, that links to the vested interests. It's very important for that very reason to be absolutely clear. Are there any vested interests? And if there are vested interests, what are they? Because when you go out to vote, the electorate would think, they would believe, that the person for whom they're voting is totally independent. And yet, if you take the trouble to discover are there any vested interests, with many of the candidates you find there are vested interests, and instead of representing your interests as a constituent within that constituency, you discover, lo and behold, vested interests take precedence. And it's good to see there are some new candidates, but what I'm fearful is the position of one particular candidate who was very much the core of the establishment, and it's almost as if he's jumped ship because he realises the way Jersey is moving, fortunately slowly away from feudalism, and he, it's quite clear to me, sees himself, he wants to be the chief minister as the chief senator, and that has to be bad for Jersey because it's just continuing as an autocratic, an elective dictator, as it were.